Hey everyone, so a few days ago I made a video responding to Cenk Uygur's tweet that basically caused a lot of controversy. And I wanted to share with you guys this video that he put out in response to the controversy surrounding the tweet. So this is Cenk Uygur and two individuals who are work for TYT. And let me just say that I think it is really cool that he has this open discussion where like two people who like work for him can like openly disagree with him on political issues, and he'll bring them on and have this discussion. Like I do think that's really cool. But for those of you who aren't familiar with the tweet, so it was in response to something that Donald Trump tweeted out. So let me read the tweet from Donald Trump to you guys. Donald Trump said, well run states should not be bailing out poorly run states, using coronavirus as the excuse. The elimination of sanctuary cities, payroll taxes, and perhaps capital gains taxes must be put on the table. Also, lawsuit indemnification and business deductions for restaurants and entertainment. And so that's what Donald Trump put out. And then Cenk Uygur replied to that tweet and said, if we had a Democrat with balls, when we take over, they'd cut off funding to red states and make them beg for their handout. Almost all of them are welfare queens who live off the blue states. Republican-run states are on average miserable failures who take more from the federal government. Um, and so like I think that tweet got a ton of backlash, and I think that some of the backlash was justified, and I think that some of the backlash was not justified. The part that I think was justified were people criticizing Cenk Uygur wanted to cut funding to those states, even though if you cut funding, like the people at the bottom in those states, they're the ones who'd get hurt the most from that. And then where I think the backlash wasn't justified, where people were upset that he used the term welfare queens. I think that really distracts from the bigger issue with the tweet. But so here's Cenk Uygur responding to the backlash that I think was justified. And so let's take a look at it, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it.
Now, here's the irony of that. Of course you're right. And in a follow-up tweet, I explained, look, guys, at the end of the day, are we going to do likewise? And are we actually going to punish the citizens of the red states? Of course not, right? But we have to solve this problem of the Republicans constantly taking hostages and then saying, well, what are you going to do about it? And Democrats sit there and cry. They go, oh, don't do that. And then they never fight back. They don't fight back rhetorically. They don't fight back politically. And then they get run over. So when there's a Republican in charge, they do punish the blue states. They do. Trump's doing it right now, right? The Democrats gets in charge. He goes, oh, I promise I'll never do anything to the red states. Oh, beloved Republican governors. And they don't do anything. They don't fight back at all. So, guys, let me put it to you, right? So, look, I know that if you, if you say, I'm not actually going to do it, and then you threaten it, it takes the power away a little bit from your threat, obviously, right? But they know that we're softies. They know we're not going to actually punish the citizens, right? So
that's, the good amount from him responding to the decent part of response to the tweet. And so this is a 23-minute clip that he put out, and the majority of the clip is him responding to the usage of the term welfare queens, which like I think is really kind of dumb, just because like the bulk of the conversation should be around that rhetorical strategy. And so let me just say, I mean, my initial kind of diagnosis of the tweet was fairly correct. He was just being hyperbolic, and he was with no intention of actually wanting to cut off funding to the red states. And like it just the notion of it made no sense on its face value, just because of what he claims to believe when he says that he has a problem with. The example that I used was that he has a problem with the sanctions being put on Iran, because even though he disagrees with the way that the Iranian government is run and the people at the top of Iran, you don't punish the people at the bottom with debilitating sanctions that like prevent them from getting like medicine and food and whatnot. And so like he is against those sanctions, and so like I just don't see how he doesn't see that cutting off funding to red states will hurt the people at the bottom of those states the most. I mean, someone pointed out that the majority, or like the states that are like have the highest percentage of black people, those are red states. Like most of those states are red states, and so like he'd be hurting black people overwhelmingly. And so like that doesn't really make sense. The people at the bottom of those states would be hurt the worst from it. And so it just really doesn't make sense. And so he's saying, okay, well, I didn't really mean it. I was just kind of saying it rhetorically as a way to fight back. And like I do agree with that on its face. Like I do think that Democrats are terrible when it comes back to fighting back against Republicans. They are rhetorically so weak. They don't push for what they should. They come to like the debate table with like already conceding most of the things that they should be like not concessions whatsoever. Like Democrats are terrible at debating. Democrats are terrible at framing the issues. They're so bad. But what Cenk Uygur did, it's just one of those things where like you don't do eye for an eye. Like you don't. We have to be better than that. Like we can't just like like we'll just do the same terrible thing to you guys. And like and, people will say that like he's just like making like a threat, and it's not like something that he'd ever intend on like carrying out. But like I mean, threats do make a difference. And the example that I'll use to like carry on with the Iran example is so back after the U.S. assassinated Qasem Soleimani, the general from Iran. Then there was that huge uproar, and in response to the idea that Iran might respond to that, Donald Trump tweeted out that if they did respond with like military action, the U.S. would in honor, I guess, of like the hostages taken by Iran like many years back. I forgot the specific number, but whatever that number was, that's how many like Iranian historical sites they would be like bombing, and like those sites that he was referring to are like civilian population centers. And like so he was saying like, oh, if you guys strike back, we will hit civilian locations, we will hit areas that are densely populated with civilians. He obviously that never happened, but like you shouldn't even threaten that. What are we doing? Like what you're a villain if you do that. You are the villain in the story that is life. You are the villain if you threaten to you guys want to do something. Oh, well, we'll just bomb a bunch of civilians, innocent people, innocent people. That is a horrible thing. And someone could say like I brought this up in a discussion the other day, and someone said, well, he never actually did it. I'm like, it's still not okay. Like you still can't just like, oh, I'm just gonna bomb a bunch of civilians. And so I would obviously this to a lesser degree apply this to what Cenk Uygur did. Like, yeah, he's saying that, oh, I would never actually do that, but you still shouldn't say it. Like that's not an idea that should be put in the ether as like what progressives should do. There are better responses to like what Donald Trump said. And so then let me also just talk about, so like I said, the rest of this segment that Cenk Uygur put out is basically them upset with him that he used the term welfare queens, because welfare queens has historically been used as a term to like against black women. And like they're upset that he used it because he's not a black woman. They even use an example of a black woman who said it, and they say that it was okay when she called other people welfare queens, but it's just not okay if he says it. And it's one of those things, like I get the strategy that Cenk Uygur was using. I tend to employ it to some degree as well. Like I like to call Republicans or conservative snowflakes if I feel like they're acting like snowflakes, because that is a term that's usually used against the left. And I feel like conservatives and Republicans, they are just a snowflake about so many things. But like the narrative has been like, oh, Democrats and leftists, they're the like sensitive ones, which I just think is totally incorrect. And so I think that I get what Cenk Uygur was doing, like trying to flip the term welfare queens. He probably wasn't expecting that like it would get this much criticism. And I just think that it's kind of silly, just because like if you want to make the substantive criticism of like the racial aspect of his tweet, it should still be about cutting off funding from the states. Like we need to stop separating racial issues from economic issues, like if we really want to discuss them, because economic issues are so intertwined with racial issues. And by getting so like, because if you really want to say that like, oh, what he said was like negative towards black people, how about talk about the fact that by cutting off funding to those states, that would more negatively affect black people? Like that is the more substantive criticism of what he's saying, if you want to make a racial claim. But just saying like, oh, he used a word that has been traditionally used against black people, like maybe he shouldn't have used it. Maybe he could use better phrasing. I think it was pretty clear what the point he was trying to make. He was just trying to say that they take from the system and they're living high and mighty, because I think it is like the 5 states that receive the most in federal funding than what they give in taxation and whatnot, are red states. And so it's like I get what he was saying with it, and like it's unfortunate that like that's the part that people are picking out of his tweet, just because like that's not the substantive criticism you should be making. And like it's the criticism. I mean, I wouldn't even just make it a racial criticism. I would just make it an economic classes criticism, where like the people at the bottom, whatever race they are, they will be hurt the worst from cutting off funding to those states. And so I wish that Cenk Uygur just hadn't sent that out. It's unfortunate that he's still basically defending it. He admitted that he was being hyperbolic, and it's not something he would actually do. But I still don't think that it was a constructive thing to even put out there at all. And I think he acknowledges that, but he's just not the type of person to like really go back on saying something like that. He's a defend what he believes kind of person, and so I do think that he probably, if he could go back in time, he probably wouldn't send that out, unless he's just super stubborn. But I think that he acknowledges that it wasn't the best idea, but regardless, I think that Cenk Uygur does 99% more good than he does negative. Like, I know a lot of people, he gets a lot of hate. It is crazy. Every time I do a video about Cenk Uygur, people they just comment about how much they hate Cenk Uygur. It's crazy how much people hate him. He's he's good. I would say he's really good for the most part. Yeah, he's kind of goofy. Yeah, he says dumb things. But like on the issues, on real issues, important issues, he's right. Like 99% of the time, or at least I think he's right 99% of the time. Like on his opinions on things. Obviously, people will disagree on whether or not an opinion can be right, but I agree with him very often. And so, it's unfortunate that he gets so much criticism, just because I really think he does a lot of good work, and he's really like just been a spearheaded this progressive movement in many ways. And so, you know, it's unfortunate to see him doubling down like this, but overall, I do think that Cenk will bounce back. He gets criticized all the time. But if you guys disagreed with anything I said in this video, please leave a comment down below. I know there's a ton of you that really hate Cenk Uygur. Please tell me why you hate him. And have a back and forth about why you hate him and whether or not that's substantive. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and